Hello, and thanks for the invitation. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you in person or in real time, but I guess we're all getting used to this new reality. And I'm pleased to try to set up the conversation by discussing some of the emerging tools and strategies for public-private collaboration, something that we've been very interested in at the center in our collaboration with UN Habitat and other partners, first in developing language of the New Urban Agenda and now in thinking about implementing the New Urban Agenda and how we do that. And then also in my own consultancy where I've been able to look on the ground at how some of these tools and strategies are actually performing and how maybe we can share these as peer-to-peer collaborators and colleagues. A key issue here is the relationship between the public and the private sector. How does the public sector define the public goods, which they can do uniquely, and establish mechanisms to achieve those public goods? How does the private sector create viable economic entities to respond to complex markets? They have the expertise to do that. Each is really critically incomplete without the other's expertise. Because without public sector expertise, we get sprawl and segregation and privatization and so on. And without private sector expertise, we get project failure. Very simply, we lack the expertise in the market dynamics to make a project a success. So how you get that balance seems really critical. And I think we all recognize there are some cautionary tales where the private sector has created projects that have gotten a lot of criticism for their exclusionary approaches, for their anti-democratic approaches, for the failure to really create the public good that we're all after. Just running through some of the mechanisms that are out there, and this is by no means an exhaustive list. The first is a public-private partnership where there's a contractual arrangement or some kind of agreement to operate in a joint venture, to acquire land or to develop infrastructure, do other parts of the project. Another is various kinds of land value capture mechanisms where the inherent value or the increasing value of the land is used to finance perhaps some of the infrastructure improvements or other things. One of the most common is what's known as tax increment finance, where the incremental tax increase on the land value helps to fund the infrastructure or other parts of the project that are needed. There are a number of other tax funding mechanisms, including various kinds of tax credits. There are the Georgist policies that essentially tax the land and don't tax the improvements on the land to encourage the creativity with fewer resources, including land resources, and to penalize the waste of land resources in phenomena like sprawl, for example. There are other kinds of public sector incentives that can be created, like grants and fee-based, system development charge offsets, where the public sector recognizes and wants to create value that's going to create a public good. And in order to transfer that externality to the project, they will create a development charge offset. They'll charge less to the project for things like infrastructure development. There are various kinds of regulatory streamlining. They include things like form-based codes that liberalize the uses of different properties, but constrain the form of the properties to create a more coherent public realm and public good. Various plug-and-play models of urban development where the public sector has created opportunities for the private sector to do simplified models that are more predictable and more reliably profitable. And then consensus planning methods that bring in the public and the private stakeholders, Tourette's and quality in my backyard or beauty in my backyard, various win-win models of development that bring the public and the private sector entities together to plan projects jointly. So these different tools and strategies can be seen in a number of my own and others' case study projects, and I'm sorry we don't have time to get into the details now, but often we see these tools in combination using a kind of toolkit approach, because of course different contexts do have different constraints and different needs. But in each case, the goal is to change what we might think of as the operating system for growth, to make better projects more feasible. Again, by combining what the private sector and the public sector each do best to ensure that the public interest is served. Thank you again for the invitation.